Mr. Chair, we're ready to go.
Welcome to this Ku-ring-gai local planning panel meeting by Zoom. On behalf of the panel, I recognise the traditional custodians.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you so much. Custodians of the land, the Ku-ring-gai people, on whose land we notionally meet. Any person speaking at this local planning panel meeting is advised that their words and personal information, including name and address, will be recorded as part of the meeting and made publicly available on Council's website via live stream and on-demand access, except any part of the meeting that is held in closed session. Accordingly, you must ensure that your address to the panel is respectful and that you use appropriate language and refrain from making any defamatory statements or discriminatory comments. Ku-ring-gai Council asked me to tell you that it does not accept any liability for statements, comments or actions taken by individuals during the meeting of the panel by conferencing technology, and are reminded that under the Local Government Act, the recording of meetings by a member of the public using any electronic device, including a mobile phone or video camera, is not permitted. Any person found recording without permission of the Council may be expelled from the meeting. On-demand viewing of each Ku-ring-gai local planning panel meeting will be available until the holding of the subsequent meeting. Recordings of KLP meetings are copyright protected and cannot be reused or reproduced without approval from Council. The first item I have to deal with is apologies, and I have no apologies received, and accordingly that should be noted. Ladies and gentlemen, the panel comprises a chairman, 2 experts and a community representative, thereby having a panel of 4 people. I will be asked each panel member to formally introduce themselves and give you a short understanding of what it is that qualifies them to be a member of this panel. Starting off with myself, I am the chairman. My name is Robert Neville Talbot, known as Angus Talbot, more often than not. I was a solicitor and a barrister practicing in this area of the law for many years until I was appointed to the Land and Environment Court bench, and I sat on the bench of that court for 15 years. I have been chairing panels of this type since before the legislation made it compulsory, and that's now extending over a period of over 10 years. The next panel member I'll ask to introduce themselves is Lindsay Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chairman's indicated, my name is Lindsay Fletcher. I'm a town planner by profession, hold a master's degree in environmental planning. I have some 50-odd years experience in planning, particularly development assessment, development control. Spent 25-odd years in various councils as a town planner and chief planner, etc. And then about the last 20-odd years, 25 years, as a consultant town planner. I've served on the regional and district panels for a period of 10 years after they were established. And I have now been on the local planning panels. I sit on about 5 or 6 for the last couple of years. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. The next panel member I introduce to you is Mr. Gerard Teresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gerard Teresi, I'm also a town planner with 35 years experience. 15 years was in local government, of which some period as a director of a council. The last 20 years in private enterprise. I do a lot of contract work for local government. I also sit on another panel as well as sitting on this panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. I am glad to welcome the community panel member, Suzanne Jolly, and ask her to give us some understanding about her experience. Thank you.
Hi, Suzanne Jolly. I'm a resident of Wahroonga. I've been in the Ku-ring-gai area as a resident of Wahroonga for the past 8 years, nearly 9 years, and a broader community member for almost 15 years in Ku-ring-gai. So very much feel like I'm part of the community and happy to represent the community. I've been on the panel for the last 3 years, recently reappointed as a community member to the planning panels. And I guess my background is environmental planning. So I've been consulting for over 20 years in the environmental planning field. So certainly bring that to bear to the panel.
Thank you, Ms. Jolly. Now, each of the panel members has completed a formal declaration of interest, and each one of the panel members has indicated that they have no interest to declare on that declaration, but I will just bring that up to date and ask whether any panel member has any interest to declare in respect of any of the agenda items today.
No interest, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I have no conflict of interest with any of the items.
And the same with myself, Mr. Chair.
And I similarly declare that I have no interest in any agenda item today. I now inquire whether there are any members of the staff who are involved in this meeting, whether they have any declaration of interest to make.
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Now, what will happen in terms of procedure is that I will call the matters, and then I will ask each of the speakers who is registered to speak. They will be entitled to have 3 minutes uninterrupted. At the conclusion of the time, a chime will be heard, and I ask that the speaker immediately then wind up their submission, hopefully having geared it to the 3-minute time beforehand. Speakers on each item will be in the order of any objectors will speak first. If there are any legal representatives, I don't think there are in this case, they would be next. And then representatives or the applicant itself will be the final persons called upon to speak in relation to the matter. So it's now down to the business of the actual meeting itself. There are two matters to be dealt with at this public section of the meeting. After the public section of the meeting, the panel will retire to deal with matters that are not required to be at a public meeting. Following that meeting, the meeting will be closed. The panel will then retire and will consider the material that it's received heretofore, and also in particular the submissions that they hear today, and make the decisions, and the decisions will be published on the council website, hopefully within the next 24 hours. The first matter that I call relates to a proposed development at number 1 Shattuck Avenue, Pymble, the demolition of an existing structure and construction of a centre-based childcare facility. And the first person that I would ask to speak, please, is Jenny Middleton. Are you there, Ms. Middleton?
Unmute. Okay, hi.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes from now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the planning panel. My name is Jenny Middleton. I also go by worked under my maiden name, Jenny Vozoff, V-O-Z-O-F-F. I had worked for 40 years in this planning sphere, 7 years in a transport planning consultancy, 13 years with Sinclair Knight Mertz in their environmental planning and social impact assessment area, 10 years with Elton Consulting doing social impact assessment and community engagement, and 1.5 years with the Department of Planning writing their social impact assessment guidelines, which have now been adopted for all state significant projects. So I understand the planning space. I haven't worked for Ku-ring-gai Council, but I was on their environmental sustainability panel when it was first formed in the early 2000s. So I have sociology, economics, and environmental planning degrees. So I am also a resident at number 6 Shattuck and believe that both 25 years here and those qualifications give me the ability to understand what's going on with this proposal and as a resident, how it will affect our local area. And I can only say that as you have, I assume, read the business paper and hopefully some of the submissions, this is not a good fit with our local area. It certainly will create primarily safety impacts, but I'm also going to go with the traffic generation that it's going to cause. Now, I've read through all the reports, including the latest updates to the traffic studies, because I think I was the one that pointed out that firstly, their traffic counts were done in the school holidays last year during COVID. A lot of their studies have been done during times when there is very low traffic volumes and not much pedestrian activity. But the main points of my submission, which I hope you've read, is that the statement of environmental effects and the traffic studies do not accurately characterize the local area in the mornings and afternoons with the traffic volumes and more importantly, pedestrian volumes that the school generates across the road. Now, I'm not going to go through it all, but I hope you've read and looked at it. My neighbour and I sat out there for a week and did our own pedestrian traffic counts, which are attached to our submission as attachments 1 and 2. And we've got graphs of the counts in the mornings and afternoons for a week, which demonstrate high levels along the street. Similarly, we have demonstrated that it's not just, you can't just talk about cars, which is what the traffic report talks about. It is cars, it is pedestrians, bikes, scooters, grandparents, prams, and pets. And they go all up and down the road, and there's hundreds of them. It is a very dangerous intersection, Shattuck Avenue with Ryde Road, not only because of the chaos that happens every day for an hour in the morning and afternoon, but the traffic coming off Ryde Road into Shattuck, it is not a simple 90-degree turn. It is around further than that, and it is down a hill, so it is blind. You've got cars coming up behind you on Ryde Road at speed, and then there are pedestrians and scooters and everything crossing that intersection at random. Coming out of Shattuck into Ryde Road, which will go right around the edge of this childcare centre, that's you cannot see the traffic coming in the closest lane, and it's not issues that are raised in the traffic report about delays of 1 or 2 cars. That is not the issue. Yes, it only happens for an hour, hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half in the afternoon, but adding these extra numbers to the chaos in the street assumes that they are just quickly passing through. They will be trying to park underneath. If they can't get there, they'll be taking up the spots. They're parking in no stopping zones. There's no policing of it. It is, my submission also has about 50 photos of the that was of dangers that we took just on a couple of mornings, and it is chaos. It is dangerous. Children are going to get killed by a car either turning or stopping, and that's just now. You add this thing and the cumulative impacts, which have not been discussed in any of these reports, will take it beyond what is already dangerous, hectic, and difficult. You've got the headmaster of the primary school who has also put it in his own submission because of the danger, and he sees it already every day. So this is, got no problem with the design. It's very pretty, but you add this new use, traffic generating use, into a chaotic environment, and you are creating a further dangerous situation, which is not adequately captured in the characterization of the local area and in the discussion of safety impacts. It talks about safety of the building, safety of access, but it does not talk about the local environment, which I believe is inadequately and erroneously characterized in all the reports. So even just to summarize in terms of, the most basic things, in terms of the compliance table with matters for consideration and the objective about risks and safety hazards, 3.1 C4, avoid risk to children. This is putting children at further risk. And secondly, the next one, local character, it is not compatible with the intense activity that happens in this local character that has been completely brushed over in the reports that I've seen. So please.
Ms. Middleton, I don't want to put you off your stride, but I suspect there's some hiccup with the timing mechanism, because I've not heard anything from that area. I take it the time has expired.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, yes, the time did go off about 3 or 4 minutes ago.
It wasn't not audible to me. Anyway, Ms. Middleton, you say you're winding up. You've obviously had a bonus.
Yay.
So
thank you.
So if you wouldn't mind winding up now, just quickly, in just a couple of paragraphs. Thank you.
Can I get confirmation that the panel has looked at the submission, because I'm not going to repeat everything in it. I just do not believe that the reports have adequately captured the local character or the cumulative impacts, and I believe they need to be looked at again. And if this is approved, it needs strong conditions about parking and timing of access to this centre that they say is not going to have any adverse effect. Thank you.
The panel has already had quite some discussion about that very aspect. Thank you, Ms. Middleton. I'll just see if there's any questions from any panel members. Mr. Fletcher?
No, thank you. No, not at this stage.
Mr. Teresi?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
And Ms. Jolly?
No questions, but that was very thorough. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your assistance. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I might just comment that I, and I'm sure others, have undertaken a site inspection, but I was there during the school pickup time, so I'm familiar with the concerns that are raised and the conditions there.
Okay, thanks. It needs to be appreciated that we are still in the effects of COVID, hence the Zoom meeting.
Yep.
The counts we did were 2 years ago.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you.
And that's been very helpful. And I can assure you that every word you've said and every word you've written will be taken into account by the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you for your assistance.
Shall I leave now, or
it's a matter
do you need me anymore?
It's a public meeting. You can stay or go as you see fit. We don't need you anymore. We're already, thankfully, got all that information from you.
Thanks.
The next person listed to speak is Young Kang. Are you wishing to address the meeting now, Mr. Kang? Not present.
He is present, Mr. Chair. I've just sent him a message to unmute his phone so we can hear him.
Mr. Chair, it's my name's Michael Haynes. I'm the applicant's representative,
Yes.
so town planner. I don't believe Mr. Kang is going to be speaking today.
I see. Thank you. Do you wish to address the panel, Mr. Haynes?
Well, I understand that the applicant's representative would go last, and happy to
Well,
take
is
that
last.
role and
You
answer
are
any
last.
questions.
You are last.
Oh, am I? Sorry. I am last. Okay. Well, yes, I will.
Do you wish to address the panel?
I would like to. Yes, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Your time starts now.
Okay. Good afternoon, panel and Mr. Chair. The application before you is for a 62-place childcare centre. The application is recommended by staff for approval. We have reviewed council's assessment report along with the conditions of consent, and my client is supportive of the council planner's assessment and the recommendation before you. We understand that there are a number of submissions to the DA. The applicant has reviewed those submissions and responded with various updated information, including an addendum traffic report, addendum acoustic report, addendum statement of environmental effects. And so we believe that the issues raised have been appropriately addressed. But if the panel is of a different view and would like some clarification of any matters, I'd welcome the opportunity to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. I think during the panel's preliminary discussion, there was some discussion about parking spaces 13 and 14 and moving them to the spaces presently 11 and 12. Do you want to clarify that, Mr. Teresi, or did I explain it sufficiently? The staff provision would move to 13 and 14, and that would free up 10 and 12 with the reserve turning bay behind, giving it sufficient space. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The other issue was, and I'm curious to understand, reading the officer's report, there's a reference that access to the basement car park is through a password system or process. I'm just wanting to try to understand how that might actually work.
Yes, that is a detail that unfortunately I'm unable to clarify, Mr. Parisi. And unfortunately, the architect who has been mostly involved in those detailed aspects was unavailable today. I would only say that if that's a concern to the panel, we'd be, welcome a condition of consent that appeases council in that regard.
So you're not sure that if the roller door is kept closed at all times and it's only open as parents arrive, so you're not sure how that operates?
I don't know. I don't know the details of it. There is a detailed operational management plan that goes with the application, but I don't believe that particular aspect is addressed in that plan. Right. I'm just checking. No, it isn't.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could just pursue that a little further and simply ask the question whether the applicant's representative would have any opposition to a condition that required the basement car park to be open at all times that the centre is open, because I certainly have a concern about any queuing of vehicles to enter or leave the site given the traffic conditions.
I can't see why that would be a problem at all. I mean, the only thing I can think of that perhaps they were seeking to control the basement was to prevent perhaps other people parking in there, knowing that the school is close by, and perhaps there'd be people arriving in that general zone near the school to drop off their kids. But that's the only reason I can think of as to why that may have been considered. So I don't think there'd be a problem with that. No.
Thank you.
What do you say about the swap in car paces?
I wasn't aware of that as an issue. Would the
It only
panel just
became
be
an
able to
issue
explain?
it became an issue this morning in our discussion.
Okay, and are you able just to explain the concern?
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Teresi will do it
Yeah.
for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, the question is that obviously what we're trying to do, that if the application was approved, is to minimise any potential queuing. And so the car spaces 13 and 14 are right at the entry point. So a discussion which is held as to whether or not two of the staff spaces are actually located in that location, which therefore would minimise any potential conflict in cars trying to manoeuvre in and out of those car spaces. That was the relevance of it.
Okay. The prima facie, I don't see a problem. The only thing that I haven't considered is I observed that there are 6 tandem staff parking spaces. And obviously, I just can't recall whether there's a specific requirement for staff spaces or whether it's just a general parking requirement.
Just to maybe assist you, the view we had is if you had car space number 12, for instance, which isn't a tandem, it would only be one space which would be behind the tandem, and I would like to think that the staff will be there before the parents
Yeah,
arrive.
sure. Yeah, no, I agree that I think that would work. Can't see a problem with that at all.
Right. Any further questions from Mr. Haynes?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, through you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher.
I just seek some comment or response on the concerns raised about pedestrian vehicle conflict, given the proximity to the local school and the traffic conditions that exist there for an hour or so each morning and afternoon. You heard the previous speaker, no doubt, so I'd be interested to hear your response on that particular issue.
Yeah, sure. So TTPA traffic consultants did provide a response to the concerns raised, and that response is dated 1 November 2021. And I imagine that's probably available to you. In that response, there is a comment by, in inverted commas, from the school principal that talks about the congestion and the afternoon congestion. The traffic consultant makes the point that the preeminent issue is that while there may be congestion during peak school arrival departure times, the movements generated by the proposed childcare centre will be relatively minor at these times. And I guess that's a point to note, that the childcare centre proposes to operate from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so typically the drop-off period and the pickup period in the afternoon is over a period of, say, 7 a.m. till about 9:30. Similarly in the afternoon from around that 3:30 till 5, or sorry, probably more like 4 till 7, which tends to be outside that peak school drop-off times, which are more around that 8:30 to 9 in the morning, and then around that 3 p.m. time in the afternoon. So that's one point in response. The other ones are that the proposal provides adequate on-site parking and drop-off spaces. It doesn't rely on stopping within the street, dropping off in the street, parking in the street. So it does all those functions on the site. It also observed that it is a busy road, as we all know. However, there are established pedestrian safety measures with a signalised pedestrian crossing very close to the site, which provides a connection from the Shattuck Avenue side of Ryde Road to the other side where the school is. And so there are footpaths on Ryde Road, footpaths within the local environment here, and there's an established movement of pedestrians in this space. So whilst it's busy, there are adequate safety measures in place. So I think I don't think I could add much more, not being a technical traffic expert, but they're my general understandings of the traffic circumstances.
Thank you. Is there any comment you'd like to make about traffic coming from the north and having to turn into the northbound lane by going into a side street and coming back?
Mr. Chair, I'll decline making any comment about that. Unfortunately, I'm not qualified to do so, but only to say that there has been a traffic assessment report done and a follow-up addendum report, and I'm sure it is addressed in there, but I don't know that answer off the top of my head.
Thank you. Well, that completes the submissions that were scheduled for this matter. The panel will take those submissions into close consideration along with the material that it already has before it, and the decision of the panel will be made this afternoon and will be published on the council's website within the next 24 hours. I thank the people who have contributed for their help to the panel, and all of that will be taken into account. The next matter is the proposed development at Bannockburn Road, Reilly Street and Bobbinhead Road, Turramurra, which is an application to modify an existing development consent, which has had some substantial history. And there are a number of speakers listed to speak for and against this matter. And the first person that I invite to speak is Sarah Muad. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is it?
Very well pronounced.
Thank you very much. All right. Now, your 3 minutes will start now, and I hope that this time I'm able to perceive the signal that those helping us provide.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, panel. So as mentioned, my name is Sarah. I'm a resident at number 85 Bobbinhead Road in Turramurra. So I'm directly adjacent to one of the blocks for this proposed development. So as was mentioned, there is a lot of history to this development, and we have now resigned ourselves to the fact that the development has been approved and is going to go ahead, despite still wholeheartedly believing that it is completely inappropriate in size and scale for the site on which it's being proposed. But now, obviously, our focus has shifted to trying to just make things as manageable as possible while the development is occurring, which will probably be the better part of 2 years. So to do this, we just want to draw the attention of the panel, please, to the traffic management plan mostly. So in early discussions, it was very clearly stated that given the nature of this section of Bobbinhead Road, there would be no construction-related vehicles of any sort being allowed to park on the road. They would all be on site, and that there would be no work zones proposed or put into place on Bobbinhead Road. And this is because although the original development application did describe the road as single lanes in each direction with a parking lane on both sides, this parking lane that they refer to is actually barely wider than 1 metre, and it's just big enough for rubbish bins. It's the narrowest stretch of Bobbinhead Road, and these lanes are really unsuitable for parking of just your everyday car, let alone utes and sort of tradie vehicles to park in. I do have photos of that I had previously submitted to council, but I can re-show you guys them if you need to see them. But I noted upon rereading some conditions from the last KLPP that there was a ever so slightest changing of wording in the applicant's traffic management plan, where they added in a little bit of consideration. So they changed the wording to say there will be no work zones on the site's frontage to Bobbinhead Road proposed for the purpose of loading and unloading materials. They just added that little extra caveat. So we really seek to have this clarified and corrected sort of to represent the original intention, which was that all construction traffic, including tradie cars, tradie utes, trucks, all those, will be parking on site and only on site during the entire construction period, and that no vehicles will be parked on the street of Bobbinhead Road. It's a really busy road, And having these larger vehicles on the sides jutting out into the road is really dangerous for traffic that's passing. And it also completely obscures the view of residents trying to get in and out of their driveways. And it applies less so to the other side because there is no access on that side at all. And more it's coming to light, there's going to be a lot of issues with parking on this development, because the proposal basically said that the basement car park will be constructed first, and then all the tradie and all the vehicles will park in that car park. However, that's only accessible from Bannockburn Road, and all access is completely prohibited from Bannockburn Road for the entire duration. So there is no way for anyone to actually get to the basement car park. So there is going to be a huge problem with parking. There's going to be nowhere to park. And I think this even highlights, again, just the inappropriateness of the entire development, but even more so at the moment, the real need for tight control over the traffic management plan and really tight monitoring. The other thing that I quickly wanted to highlight about the traffic.
I heard it.
Oh, did you? I didn't hear it. Sorry. I'll wrap up my very last sentence. Is that okay?
Thank you. No, yes, well, I invite you to wind it up in your own time. Thank you.
Thank you. Was just very briefly that the condition that there is to be no construction traffic movement at all on Bobbinhead Road, or the other side, but this one particularly Bobbinhead Road, between school drop-off and school pickup time. So those peaks in the morning, 8 to 9:30 and 2:30 to 4. That's already in there, but we're just really requesting really tight, strict adherence to these rules with significant actual penalties if they're breached, because the impacts will be really huge. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your assistance. Before you go, I'll just see if Mr. Fletcher has any questions for you.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Jolly? Ms. Jolly?
No questions further, thank you, but thank you.
The same, Mr. Chair, no questions.
All right, thank you for your assistance. Now, the next person who's listed to speak in relation to this matter is Richard Whittington. Are you there, Mr. Whittington?
I am, thank you. It's Whittington.
Oh, Whittington, I do apologise.
It's perfectly all right. You're not the first, and you won't be the last.
Oh, well, I suffer from bad pronunciations of a surname, so I sympathise with you. Mr. Whittington, would you like to commence your 3 minutes now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've made more submissions on this DA than anyone. All of them relate to child pedestrian safety. So I want to start by commending the panel for its clear and specific response to those concerns, which took the form of Condition 9, which is part of the DA approved by this panel on the 19th of August last year. It covers the construction traffic management plan and outlines requirements which I know are welcomed by local residents and particularly by the Pymble Public School community. The panel ruled that the provisions of Condition 9 must be included in the final construction traffic management plan, which the applicant will submit before work commences. If the applicant seeks to vary anything in Condition 9, I understand community stakeholders must be notified and the matter will return to the KLPP for determination. That much is clear. What remains unclear is who will monitor compliance with the CTMP and who is responsible for penalising non-compliance. If you ask the Department of Fair Trading, they say that construction traffic does not fall under the purview of the private certifier appointed to ensure compliance with other aspects of the development. Advice from well-qualified sources is emphatic. They say it is the council's job. If you ask the council, they say the private certifier is responsible for monitoring compliance with the approved CTMP, including the KLPP imposed conditions. The question becomes, does the panel or the council know who is responsible? And if it is the council, as distinct from the private certifier, can we assume that consultation on the CTMP will occur with the local area command of the New South Wales Police and Transport for New South Wales, for instance, not to mention the 3 schools affected, Sacred Heart, Northside Montessori, as well as Pymble Public School? The only other point on which I seek clarity is whether the panel intended there to be a distinction between, quote, construction traffic, unquote, and, quote, construction-related traffic, unquote. Both terms are used in Condition 9 and it's left people a little confused. Again, I thank and commend the panel for its sensitivity to child pedestrian safety, and I hope this is an opportunity to provide a little more reassurance on these 2 points of concern. Who will monitor and enforce the TTMP? And is there any difference between construction-related vehicles and construction vehicles? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Whittington. There's some difficulty about this panel clarifying that for you, even if it was the original panel, but this is not the original panel. It wouldn't be for us to interpret that, but I am sure one thing, notwithstanding the difference in the panels, the council officers will have heard your plea, and that it will be part of their responsibility to see that there is a strict adherence to the intent of those conditions, and also in relation to the matters raised by Mrs. Muard, that there are important considerations in relation to traffic management that have to be taken into account. So thank you for your observations.
Thank you.
The next person listed to speak is a speaker on behalf of the applicant, and that is Tina Christie. You there?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank the panel for their time today regarding this matter. The site, I just want the community and the panel to be aware that the site actually has a different owner from the original approval that was granted. The current owner acquired the site last year and has worked and wants to continually work closely with the adjoining neighbours. The modification before the panel today is to primarily improve the amenity of the units whilst respecting those adjoining neighbours. The applicant has had numerous discussions with the immediately adjoining neighbours, and we believe has provided a significant improvement in the following ways. We have reduced the bulk and scale of the development, we've increased the visitor parking, we've reduced the number of bedrooms overall, we've increased privacy for the adjoining neighbours, and we've also provided additional landscaping on site. We're happy with the report and no changes to the conditions, apart from I understand there was an amendment report from council just in relation to some of the plan revision numbers for condition 1.
Yes, we have that schedule.
You have that? Excellent.
Yes, thank you. That's the schedule that you sent in on the 7th of December?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, so we're fine and happy with the report, the recommendation, the conditions, and basically myself is here to answer questions, and I also have Karen Sue from PDD Architects. With regards to the concerns about the construction traffic management plan, there are appropriate conditions imposed which will require that those details be provided prior to any works on the site. We're obviously aware of the history of the site and we do want to work with the neighbours in relation to that. I just want to thank you for your time.
Well, I was pleased to hear your last remark because it's a site that has its problems in relation to traffic management. And so one would expect there be some elements of goodwill in relation to complying with the conditions as they've been imposed. I take it from that remark that Karen Sue is only here to answer questions if that's required. Is that the position? Yes. Are there any questions for Tina Christie? Mr. Teresi?
No, Mr. Chair, other than just seeking clarification from the applicant that my understanding looking at the proposal which is before us, there's no intention to amend condition 9 in the way it's worded in any event. Am I correct in making that assumption?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, it stands in its original form.
That's correct.
Mr. Fletcher?
I guess a question showing my ignorance of the current conditions, I'm sorry, but is there a condition requiring a community liaison arrangement during the construction period? Is that part of the construction management plan?
Council officer?
Or Ms. Christie?
To be honest, I don't know if there's a specific position about committee liaison, but to get to the point where we are now, the applicant and architects have had numerous discussions with the immediate.
That might be so. It's a question about whether there's a condition. I don't think I noticed it.
I don't.
Yeah.
No one from the council speaking up. Is there someone there who wishes to speak up on that matter?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Fletcher, the answer to that question is no.
Right.
There is no requirement for community liaison in that condition, no.
Thank you. So leading from that then, can I ask the applicant's representatives whether they would have any objection to such an arrangement?
If it arises out of the modification.
Well, it arises, I guess, from concerns about traffic implications beyond the immediate neighbours.
The applicants
which are not subject to the modification. Anyway, we'll have a discussion about
We'll have
that.
a discussion about that.
I can hear Mr. Fletcher's interest in imposing such a condition. So whether or not we can do that is a matter for us to discuss. But
yes,
the response by the applicant would be helpful.
The applicant's happy to work with neighbours, but we understand that the current traffic report and council's traffic engineers are all in agreement with our proposal, including how the proposal will work once it's built, but also during the construction. So, I mean, the applicant's always happy to work with the neighbours, as long as it doesn't change the application, or as long as the neighbours don't perceive that it's a chance to change the application. That's the only concern.
I mean, at a practical level, picking up the comments of the first speaker, if the plan is to construct the basement parking first and then use that for on-site parking by construction or the construction workers, how do you actually do that if they can't access the site via Bannockburn Avenue?
That's why the condition is imposed that the construction traffic management plan, all the details we provided prior to the actual works. The applicant is aware that Bannockburn is to be the main entrance, and they are aware that
not for that construction.
Pardon?
Not for the construction of that excavation.
No, sorry, that's correct. Sorry. That's for the Bannockburn for the final. Sorry, for the final approval. Bannockburn obviously is the main. For the construction, it's off the Bobbin Head Road, and the applicant's aware of that. The applicant's willing to work, but I can't answer the actual construction side of it. I'm sorry. Those details have to be provided with the prior to any works. As per that condition, the applicant's aware of the condition. They're happy to work with that.
So you believe that you can get access from Bobbin Head Road to that excavation?
Yes, the traffic engineers have looked at it. They believe it can be achieved. That's as far as I can comment on that at the moment.
Well, it's clearly a condition that you must, so
that's right.
That probably answers most of the inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Mr. Chair, I would have also assumed with the imposition of condition 9 and the preparation of that plan would be available to the community in any event, so they would understand the arrangements which would be in place.
You would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have a discussion about that before we make the final decision. Now, Ms. Jolly, have you got any contribution that you'd like to make in relation to this particularly community-sensitive development?
Not in addition, Lindsay asked a question that I was going to ask, but aside of that, I think it's a discussion around the conditions, and all the points that have been made are very much noted. So I think we just need to assess those conditions and make sure that they are fit for purpose.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Jolly. Thank you for all of those who have contributed to this session of the panel meeting. All of those matters will be taken into consideration, bearing in mind that any changes that the panel might seek to impose by conditions in the circumstances need to be conditions that arise out of the proposed modification rather than the original matters that were determined when the application was approved. But however, the panel's quite capable of dealing with those sort of matters. And I assure you that every word that you've spoken will be taken into account in our discussion. That's the end of the public session for this meeting. And the panel will now go into a closed session. And after that closed session, we'll be in a position to consider the matters which have been raised and make the final determination of the matters that are before it. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance. The public meeting is closed.